Journalists Jonathan Allen and our colleague Amy Parnes, they tell the inside story of what led to Joe Biden's lucky victory in the 2020 election in their new book, Lucky, How Joe Biden Barely Won the Presidency.
That's right. So New York Times bestselling authors, Jonathan Allen, Amy Parnes, they join us now to talk about their new book. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Amy, let me start with you. So one of the most interesting parts of the book really is the inside story of the Democratic primary and the meltdown that was happening with the Iowa caucuses in particular. Just share with us some of those nuggets from both the campaign side, but also the deep frustration and some suspicion also of the connections of the Shadow app and more. These are things that haven't gotten much attention, obviously, in a long time, but were very important stories at the time.
Right, and we all remember kind of the meltdown of the Iowa caucus and how things weren't able to be reported on time. We sort of take you behind the scenes of that, in particular, about how the campaigns were freaking out. Obviously, one of the lucky things that we thought happened to Joe Biden was he came in fourth in Iowa with all of this going on around him. And it was actually a good thing for him because usually the candidate who wins gets a bump, a big announcement. But because of this whole big meltdown around the malfunction around the reporting results, no one ever really came out of it the victor. And Joe Biden kind of was glossed over, and it was almost like no one knew really what happened to him. And that was a big moment in the book. And we kind of take you behind the scenes of every campaign and what they were thinking in that exact moment.
Yeah. And Jonathan, I mean, Biden obviously did a lot of things right in the campaign and had a message that resonated with enough people that he is now president of the United States. However, one of the other themes in your book is this campaign was a total mess at the beginning. The wheels were good. They were out of money. There was a campaign staff shakeup. Greg Schultz, who's the original campaign manager, gets removed from that post and has to find out in the page of the New York Times. I mean, this thing really looked like it was headed for disaster. Give us some of those details, and then how did they bring it back online?
Absolutely, Crystal. The candidate himself at the beginning, if you went and saw him at events in Iowa and in New Hampshire, I mean, he was rusty at best. He was a little bit angry in terms of, when voters gave him a little elbow, he would come back with a right cross.
Lying dog-faced pony soldier comes to mind.
I'll never forget that.
Exactly. Or challenging people to push-up contests, calling him fat. Biden was having a rough time on the campaign trail. In addition to that, he was having difficulty, and we go into this in the book, sort of behind the scenes, trying to line up Democrats to endorse him and get behind his campaign, whether that was donors or, like the Reverend Al Sharpton or Stacey Abrams, people we take you inside his meetings with them, trying to get them to endorse him. People were sort of staying away. Barack Obama, former president of the United States, who had Joe Biden as his vice president, didn't want to endorse Biden. He didn't think Biden should run. He didn't think Biden should have run in 2016. He went, and we report on this, he invited Biden's aides into his office right before the campaign started in 2020 and said to them, I want you to make sure that Joe Biden doesn't embarrass himself. He wasn't worried that Biden was going to lose. He was worried that Biden was going to tarnish Biden's legacy and Obama's own legacy. And then you fast forward into the primary campaign a little bit in terms of some of these lucky breaks. I mean, the Iowa caucus app failure obscures his fourth place finish. The Iowa poll, the big Des Moines Register poll, gets spiked. Pete Buttigieg's aides, we go into this in depth, how they get it spiked so that it doesn't get released because of a problem with one of the questions to one of the respondents. And as a result of that, Biden doesn't get this bad media for 48 hours that he's going to come in a distant fourth in Iowa. He comes in fifth in New Hampshire. He's so close to being out of money that his aides come to him and basically say, you might have to refinance a house and put your own money into the campaign. So, you see through all these moments where Biden gets a lift, including all of the progressives who normally, are willing to fight pretty hard against, on the issues and sometimes against the candidates, sweeping in behind him in that moment, basically between the time of Super Tuesday and when, finally when Bernie Sanders gets out. the progressives decided to put some of their priorities in the back seat and make sure they got a Democrat elected.
Yeah. Amy, one of the other fascinating parts to me was, a famous quote now that you guys have in the book about how Anita Dunn on the Biden campaign said COVID is the best thing that ever happened to Joe Biden. I mean, it's a bit crass, but it is obviously true. What was that dynamic like in terms of how the Biden campaign looked at the opportunity of Biden in the basement, which became a meme, but really a blessing in many ways to his campaign?
Yeah, it sort of gives you a window into what the campaign was thinking in that moment. I mean, even going into COVID and in the primary, there was a discussion about what to do and how to frame Biden's schedule so that he wasn't really speaking late into the day where he would be gaffe prone and have his missteps. So they were always very on guard about him going off script. And what the pandemic did was it sort of allowed him to remain at home, obviously talk about how it's important to be at home, but it kept him off the campaign trail in a very key way. So he wasn't able to make these blunders. And that was really important. And so obviously they would never say this publicly, but what we did when we were reporting this book was we found out what they were thinking internally about what was going on. And this was one of the things that they were thinking, that it was actually helpful to him because he wasn't out there in the way that then President Trump was. And so it's an interesting moment.
Yeah,
it really is.
One of the subtext, not even subtext, one of the plot lines in the piece about the Democratic primary is the entire Stop Bernie campaign, right? There was a desperate effort by everyone from, Hillary Clinton thought about getting in the race. Michael Bloomberg actually did get in the race. Obama's working behind the scenes. You have this incredible quote in here. You say many unnerved Democratic establishment centrists weren't sure what they would do if it came down to Trump versus Sanders in a general election. Founded or not, their fears of losing their party to socialism competed with their fears of Trump winning a second term. Now, let's be clear, some of these same people were likely out there saying that Trump was literally Hitler and bringing fascism to America, and they put that on a par with the idea of Bernie Sanders winning the nomination. Talk about some of the efforts that were made there.
I think one of the best stories about this in the book, and, we've got, I wish we had 12 hours to talk about all the stories in the book. But one of the best stories that sort of gets at this is John Kerry, the former senator from Massachusetts, former Secretary of State, is campaigning for Biden in Iowa as a surrogate. And he sees Biden on the campaign trail, and he thinks Biden's doing terribly. He's watching Sanders rise. It looks like Sanders is going to be in good shape in Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada. And Kerry is in Joe Biden's hotel at the breakfast bar, basically, just 100 feet away from his own allies who are working for Biden. And he's on the phone. He's talking to somebody about what it would take for himself, John Kerry, to get in the race. And this is like 2 days before the Iowa caucuses. And he's saying, I'd have to step off of the board of the Bank of America. I'd have to make sure I had enough cash in reserve, to pay for myself while I tested this out. And one of the things that he's saying during this time is that basically the Democratic Party needs to do everything in its power to stand up and stop Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, it really is just, there's so many different things here. We legitimately mean it. Both Crystal and I are obsessed with the book. I hope everybody goes out there and buys it. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Congrats,
Thank
guys.
you both.
Great work on this.
Thank you so much.
Of course. And we'll have more Rising for you after this.